Can I communicate with patients via unsecured email or text messages?
Maybe.
All right. That's our show for today, folks.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT. And joining me, Donna Grindle of Carden.
Yeehaw.
Still trying to get used to dropping the other part. Just Carden.
Well, you can say it.
It's like a hard stop. Carden.
You know, people are like, how do you pronounce it? Is it Carden or Cardon? And I was like, whatever. People say Cardon. We don't. But I get it because I'm the Don.
All righty. So as we record this, the HIPAA boot camp is next week. As you listen to this, it's already happened. So, but we are at capacity. So that's great.
Yeah, we have reached that point where it was like, if somebody else begs us, we might do it, but it was going to be too many. So, I'm looking forward to it, and we're real excited about it. And so next episode, you'll get a little bit more. Of course, David will say right now, it was great.
It was awesome. We had a great time.
Yeah. And we've got people who are like, I don't want to do the online thing. I want to do it in person. So we're still trying to figure that one out. And we will have another in-person one. So if you are interested, let us know. We're trying to figure out when we can fit that in, though. Yeah. But it'll probably be summer or fall.
There's benefits either way. So, if you do the in-person one, you get some extra benefits. If you do the online one, then, of course, you don't have to travel. But you
don't have to travel, but it does spread it out, and you don't just get to hang out with us and talk about stuff. So.
Yeah, it's the hangout sessions that are pretty valuable. But you have to be there live for that.
Yeah, because, we hang out afterwards and have lunch together and all that stuff. So.
Yep. Speaking of hanging out, where are you going to be hanging out?
Well, we got busy stuff still happening around here. So we've got, at this point, I've just finished teaching the Format Approved class. We just finished, at the time this comes out, the Help Me with HIPAA class, boot camp, and wow is all I can say, because in April I've got a couple of different things going on. Like I said, we're booking more private stuff now, not public. They threw me into public. Ron White, yes, I'm a fan. April 22nd through the 25th, going to be in Southern California, Newport Beach, at the Jaws Society Annual Conference. Just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water. Ransomware attack. We're exhibiting at the Georgia MGMA conference in Savannah, April 29th through May 1st. So if you're in that area in the Carolinas and South Georgia and northern coast of Florida, let us know.
So you're going to be an exhibitionist?
There's so many things I could do there. I'm just going to let it go. And then June 14th, I'm going to be in Dalton, Georgia, speaking to the North Georgia Medical Management Association. Let's move along.
Do they have a South Georgia Medical Management?
They do, but I don't know that. I spoke with them last year, and I can't remember what they call it's a different name, but yes, there are a couple different ones in the Savannah. We're trying to work out a date to speak in the Savannah one, but last year I spoke at the South with the Valdosta one. So,
okay,
last year. So we'll see.
Cool
we'll see. They're all over the place.
They are. So we had a person wanted me to remind everybody about the donation site. So I'm doing that. It's helpmewithhipaa.com/give. If you are interested in helping to keep the lights on, we've had some people recently who said that they wanted to give a one-time large lump sum. I might have put an adjective or two in there. But so I created a way for those who just want to give once instead of doing the recurring. But either way you go, we definitely appreciate it because it does help pay the cost. And they are not cheap. It costs a lot of money to put a show on. But we do it for your benefit. So we're going to dive into some listener questions. We mentioned this last week that we're going to have this episode coming up. So we have some listener questions. I think the title, as I'm looking at it, is 5 listener questions, but we have 6.
Yeah, I think we decided to add one. Yeah.
So
Just
there's no
came
telling.
in
It may
this
turn into
morning.
10 by the time we get to the end of it. Who knows?
Yeah. And then someone said,
Yeah. So we love the listener question part because it gives us the opportunity to kind of interact with the listeners and answer those questions that are the burning questions of the day. So
and we're getting a lot of emails from the listeners and messages from the listeners, which is really cool that everybody's becoming more interactive. We used to say, "We know you're listening.
I know.
Please ask us things." So we really do enjoy at least knowing that you're out there. So send us a little email that says, "I don't want to ask you anything. I just want you to know I'm out here." We appreciate it.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, honestly, and we joke about this, but really when people send in a message and it's like, man, you just cracked me up. I loved it. Oh, and I learned something too. And we're like, we don't really care about the learning part.
We said that to somebody and they kind of felt a little offended because we're like, did you laugh? Because that's really what we care about.
Yeah.
Oh, you learned something awesome. But
Well,
Did you?
every podcast can teach you something, but not very many can entertain you as they're teaching you something.
well, we just know David's objective when we started this. So, but we did get we were both having just strung out days. Our businesses are growing, which is great, but that means we feel like hamsters on a wheel and we're yelling at each other from our wheels periodically throughout the day. And we did get a great message. It had a question and some other stuff, but I sent it today. I hopped over to David and said, "Hey, did you see that message? It just kind of reboots our day and it makes it all worth it." So you go ahead and read that message there, David.
Okay, so this message is from Alex, and he or she says, I don't know which one it is.
Oh, good move, at least being they said.
Yeah, they said. That's the problem with having those names that go back and forth. Anyway, so we'll say it's a he. Anyway, he says, I cannot tell you both how much I enjoy the podcast. I drive about 1,000 miles a week. Wow. And you keep me company most of the way. I've only gone through 80 episodes because I keep going back to refresh my memory on something that you said. You are funny and informative. I have been in healthcare insurance, IT, and now healthcare compliance. I believe I have some level of expertise with HIPAA, and you both challenge my knowledge. So thank you both so much for what you do, Alex.
Thanks for listening, Alex, and letting us know that you're out there.
Alex, that's not just listening. That's creepy listening.
Which takes us perfectly to the next topic.
Yeah. So apparently, Alexa, hey, there's Alex with an A.
We're not saying Alex is creepy. We're saying, Alexa, we told you she's creepy.
Yeah. So we had a podcast a while back. We talked about how Alexa listens to everything that's said and why it's probably not a good idea to have one in a healthcare environment.
Yeah. And for those who haven't heard that episode, just a quick that when it thinks it hears you say something, it sends it up to the Amazon servers, that 30-second little clip, to see what you've told it. And it processes it up there in the servers, not on the device itself. So all that recording sits on your account. So if you log into your Amazon account, you can go and listen to all the different recordings that it kept. And many of those do have you telling her to do something. However,
sometimes when no one's around.
well, it just, I don't know. I started seeing it over the weekend or something like that. The creepy Alexa laugh. And apparently she's got a bug. Mm-hmm. She keeps thinking that she hears somebody say, Alexa laugh. And just randomly in a quiet house, she goes, and David has an older one. He unplugged it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we tried plugging it in, but she didn't laugh the same way because she clearly needs an update as the recordings that we've heard. So if you haven't heard the creepy Alexa laugh, get online and Google it. We'll see if we can get a copy to stick in here in the editing. But she is clearly having issues, and she's listening all the time. Mm-hmm. And who knows what you're doing or what sound it's hearing. But Amazon says they're fixing the bug, but she keeps thinking that somebody's saying Alexa laugh, and she just randomly is just yeah, I'd be creeped out too.
That's kind of
All
funny.
right.
Yeah, I've not heard mine do anything like that. So I know one time way back when I first got it, you and I were recording, and just out of nowhere, it was like, I don't understand what you're asking me. And I'm like, I ain't ask you nothing.
Yeah, then it started telling you stuff you didn't ask.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like Monkey's birthday.
Yeah. Monkey's birthday is blah, 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 blah.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
so, yeah. So the real question is, if nobody's around and Alexa speaks, does anybody really hear it? Is there a
You
sound?
see the dog standing in front of it, cocking its head back and forth like, there's no one here. What are you saying? Give me a treat.
No kidding. So,
All right, so on to our questions.
first question of the day. This is discussing what do we do with Active Directory users and computers that are no longer used. For those of you who are not technical in nature, Active Directory is typically a portion of a server that is, among other things, it is doing user authentication. So as you put in your username and password on your computer, it is authenticating that through the server in Active Directory and then allowing you or not allowing you access to your computer.
And that's a Microsoft product that manages all kinds of things on a large network. So not only does it do username and passwords, but it does the policies about what it'll allow on a computer and how it configures things. And there's a lot of things that thing does. And it's very powerful if it's used properly.
Yes, a plethora of things.
A plethora. I like it. We're going to throw that one in there. What? I appreciate the email that said that word was for Donna.
Yeah.
Just
no.
saying.
So the question is, we have clients asking, what is the risk level of having users disabled in Active Directory? Do they need to be removed, deleted? Also, what if the computers have been disabled? Is there a risk there? Do they just need to be removed?
So, first thing, you have one that, and we mentioned this before, that there's some misinformation that you heard at a conference and that you would like to point out at this point, at this time.
Okay, so before we answer this question, apparently there is a school of thought that a business cannot possibly be HIPAA compliant unless they have a server running Active Directory.
And what do you say to that, David?
I say bullocks.
Bollocks.
Yeah, it's certainly within the HIPAA rules. It says that you have to be able to authenticate users. It does not say how you authenticate users. So it's
Right.
It's,
Or even where.
right. So in my opinion, you do not have to have a Active Directory server, but you do have to have a way that can authenticate the users.
Yes. And therein lies the confusion when you have a small office. And this really applies most often to small offices.
Right.
Where everything they do is in the cloud and they really don't have a specific reason to enforce things at the client level the same way as a large enterprise does. So people come in and say, well, you must have a Microsoft server with Active Directory to be HIPAA compliant. That is wrong. You have to handle it somehow. And those are not cheap. I mean, just to put in a domain controller, even for, less than 10 users, what do you guess that costs, David?
Labor and all, you're probably pushing $5,000.
At least, if not a little, not a little bit more by the time you have to deal with the different computers and what can join the domain and your reconfigurations and that's just not required. I mean, if need be, if you feel that you need those kind of things, there's tools like Jump Cloud, where it does that authentication and everything from the cloud. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. But
they have Azure Active Directory now as well, which I've not played with yet. But
yeah,
Microsoft is getting into doing the Active Directory in the cloud or as a service, so they say. So you don't have to have that piece. but there's so many different ways to do this. I mean, you could even do it through a Linux server if you have somebody who understands how to do that.
Right.
But
there's a lot of solutions to the problem, and that gets down to how do you secure your devices. And you can have people, you can configure your device, your desktop device, where they are required to authenticate and they have a secure password, and it, won't let, unless you're an administrator, load things and all of those kind of things without Active Directory.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just put that one to bed. No, you are not required to have it to be. There is nothing in the HIPAA law that says you must have Microsoft Active Directory.
Yeah. Besides, if you're running Chromebooks or Chromeboxes, you're authenticating through Google.
Yeah. So there's too many. That is just too broad of a statement. Now, if you have a giant Microsoft network running all these Windows apps, probably going to need it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that doesn't mean it's the only solution. So now, taking it back to this Active Directory, because all your users are defined in there and all your computers are defined in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they are, David says.
Yes, they are.
And what happens is, and this comes into play when we run tools on the network, and it'll alert us that this is a potential issue and we should consider it. And I've actually had technical people just go off on us, started mansplaining to me how networking works.
Did you say
I didn't do.
Yeah.
You can't even get in a word in edgewise, like I'm an idiot. And because we put on there, we have found all of these, and you should consider or evaluate if this is a potential security issue. That's it. That's what it said. And the guy's just going nuts until I finally said, we said evaluate. It literally says evaluate it. So it goes back to the same thing of this misconception of what the requirements are and what things, it's what's reasonable and appropriate. And there are there's probably three schools of thought. One school of thought is you don't have to care because it's Active Directory, which is that school of thought is once I have Active Directory, I don't have to do anything else. It's done. That's wrong. We'll go with that. But then the other is I don't have to clean it up. And then the final is I'm going to do best practices. And the best practices say I'm either going to delete them or I'm going to create what it's called an organizational unit. But basically, it's kind of saying we've got this other company over here that's not connected to us. It's not on our network. And we can move all of our users over there, and Active Directory won't know they're there. It's a trick that you play on the computers. And, if you're worried about your users coming back and you want to have the same config and all that kind of stuff, that's the way to do it. That's the Microsoft best practice if you don't want to remove those users. But leaving them there is not a good idea if you're not going to do that. You've got to keep those things cleaned up. I'll give you one example right now is there was a user, a domain admin user, and the description of it was something, disabled January 2016. Somehow that thing got activated and was used to spread ransomware. I'm just saying, I know for a fact that happened. I won't go any further into how I know or where. But if that user had been removed or at least moved to another OU, then that couldn't have happened. So when we see those lists of those old computers and, everybody's like, oh, that computer's gone. It's not going to be turned on. All you really have to do is name it that, and it's going to start trying to do stuff and talk to it and some other stuff. And so it's really best to either delete them or move them to an unoperational spot where it can't actually log into your network. It thinks it's part of another network.
Right. So
it's too easy, isn't it? I mean, to me, it's just so easy. And
I see this a lot, especially when I'm walking into a client that's, already has a server and, You know, they're like, hey, we haven't had an IT company in a while, or we just got rid of one. And you go in there and you're like, wow, you've got like 10 employees, but 30 names in here. What's going on? But so that you have two sides of this. One is if you're an IT person listening, you should check, see what's in there, and then, you know, take that to the decision maker and say, all right, let's clean this up. Who needs to be removed? If you're somebody who has hired the IT company, then you need to make sure that's getting done, because when you call the IT company, you say, you know, so-and-so is no longer working here as of Friday, and they're like, all right, cool, we'll disable or remove their account. Make sure that's getting done, because sometimes they'll disable it for maybe a day or two to give them time to move some data around or whatever, and then delete it. You just need to make sure it's getting done.
Yeah, I mean, really the safest thing to do, because a lot of people are like, well, if I do that, I could lose data and the, you know, this and that. Put them in that other organizational unit. Create a deactivated organizational unit. Move everything in there. That's fine. I don't argue at that point. What I argue with is you can't just leave things laying out there and not know that's where they are.
True.
So if you get any report that shows you, ooh, I've got all these deactivated, just make sure it's in a separate unit that is all by itself. So that's what you should do. If you're not going to delete them, put them in their own unit. So even if they did get activated, they couldn't actually access the network.
Very good.
You agree?
I agree.
Well, then, we've done well on our first question.
We can move right along. All right, number 2, when do you notify other entities like state attorney generals, not just HHS? The question, when does, quote unquote, other security breach notification requirements become applicable, like from the attorney general's office? I'm sure a lot of small businesses have no idea that some of the state AG offices have security breach notification requirements for PII.
Yes, that's why we did a whole episode on knowing what your state knows, and we'll link to it here. State laws do matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it goes into play of whichever's more stringent is which one takes control.
Yep.
And personally haven't been able to even keep up. There are so many state and federal laws being discussed since the Equifax breach. I ironically even seen one that basically says, you don't have to notify anybody unless you're sure something bad happened. Because they're trying to keep business from doing it, because the thing is that you can't prove there was harm. So since you can't prove there's harm, why should I tell you?
Well, another one I saw recently said something to the effect of, if you have a breach, I can't remember if it says you have one or if you think there's one, but none of the officers in your company can trade. No, wait a minute. No, the business itself cannot trade on the stock exchange until that is cleared up.
Right. It's after the Equifax madness.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean,
so you got the federal level stuff is in flux, but then the states, I mean, even Alabama, which was one of the final 2 states that didn't have any kind of law, they've got one going on now. Every state is going to have their own. I can't imagine that we'll be without one after everything that's happened. And, we talked a few episodes ago earlier this year about the North Carolina one. I don't know if you've kept up with the how that's gone, but it was a pretty strict one.
It would, if it passes the way it is, it'll be the most strictest in the nation.
Strictest. The most strictest.
The most strictest in the nation, because the EST matters.
Never mind. But there's so many changes that are going on that you do have to pay attention, because this isn't just about healthcare. In fact, most of the state laws didn't until now include healthcare information. It kind of set it aside and said, you've got HIPAA to deal with, we won't mess with it. But many of the states are now amending their laws they had in place to say healthcare information included, because they would say you've got 30 days to notify, and HIPAA says you got 60. And they didn't want the healthcare entities to get a break that the other businesses were getting. So I they have a break and everybody else. It's got to be fair. And the overall changes that we're seeing, granted, most of them haven't been signed into law yet. We don't know when they'll take effect. Many times the state laws that get signed in at this point will take effect July 1st. So we've got time waiting for all of the dust to settle to find out exactly which state laws are in place. But you definitely need to know that you may have to notify your state attorney general based on anybody's data breach, and know this, that some cases say if you have a citizen from another state, so imagine the people that are on the Georgia-Florida line, that's a good band too, but Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Georgia's got a lot of stuff going on. That's why I stay so busy here. And I go all these other places, and Georgia just keeps me busy. I got Georgia on my mind.
Georgia, California line.
There you go.
So,
but that's why we're going to have on next week an attorney that specializes in cybersecurity laws and all these kind of things to try and help us sort out how do you even figure that out. But you definitely need to do it.
So on kind of a related note, have you heard about the Georgia law they're trying to pass that basically makes it illegal to unknowingly access a computer?
Yeah, it would mean that,
but with no caveats, like no exemptions, which means people who
I can't be a cybersecurity person anymore.
You can't do pen testing or anything because what are you going to do?
It's against the law.
It's like kidding me.
With these technical things, they need to bring in technical people to explain it to them and fix those kinds of problems. I love the concept. Yeah, it's great. Is to say, we have a state law that if you're messing with somebody else and you're logging into their computer without permission, even if you know their password, then that's against the law. But you got to look at it realistically. That means you can't do remote support unless every single time someone tells you it's okay.
Yeah.
And invites you. Well, you know how many people are going to be mad at you? I'm glad I don't do that business.
Yeah.
Just because, what do you mean I've got to be at my desk for you to work on my computer? The whole point is for me not to be
I'm
there.
just going to have to start charging Georgia people more.
Hopefully that will not pass and, everybody will calm down. So, state laws are insane.
I do think they had one exemption, like, you could look at your kid's computer. I'm like, oh, thank you for giving me permission to look at my kid's computer.
That I paid for and set up. Yeah.
Anyway, so on to number 3. Providing services in remote locations. How do you maintain security in those situations? So the question reads, behavior analysts are often few and far between, but we still need to observe our clients in natural situations. For this reason, we often act as consultants in remote areas and need to access our internet and files away from central office, if we have one at all. Can you give any suggestions on how to maintain security in such a situation?
Yes.
Okay, next question.
And I think this was on one of our surveys before our episode came out, because we get these and I just stockpile them. I'm trying to do a better system now, so hopefully they won't delay so long. But we did do an episode earlier this year about cybersecurity outside the office. And we went into a lot of detail there. But we're going to deal specifically with accessing the internet and files. What's the best way to do that? And we did go into some deep explanations. But when you are outside the office, if you're going to use any method that connects you back to the office, you either need to have an internet connection that's one of those personal hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use I just tether my phone to whatever I'm doing. I don't know about
it depends on where I'm at. I mean, if I'm at a coffee shop, I use my phone. If I'm like at a hotel where I'm going to be there for, days, of course, I'm going to turn on the VPN on my phone and my laptop and all that and just usually use their Wi-Fi. Never plug in to their ports if they have those available.
Yes, we did learn that. Not without a USB condom. So
It's a thing.
So
it's a thing.
It is a thing. You look it up. It is a thing. But when you are out there, one of the things that I had an IT director tell me that he stumbled upon a policy that was put in place by the people, the person in charge of the people that are going out like this, who had said you can connect to the client's home network, Wi-Fi network, and access. And no one talked to the IT person, but they implemented this policy, and it was like, shut that down right now, because we both know that's bad. That's really bad.
Yeah, it is. And we run into this sometimes with clients. And I mean, I even have the same issue at my home. I got kids that are online and they're playing games. And of course, a lot of those games, they have mods, and you have to go to these sites that you probably shouldn't be going to to download these mods, because it's full of all kind of viruses and crazy stuff. So I have to keep them completely segmented. And I have enterprise grade security at my home because of all that.
Yeah, it's how many different routers and servers do you put in place in your house? Most people have one, and they don't understand how to be paranoid like we are. So that is the most important thing: is don't connect to other people's networks unless you're like me and I go reconfigure my family's networks. But if I'm going to do anything serious, even when I do that, I get on a VPN. Or I tether to my phone. So a personal hotspot, VPN, those things are absolutely imperative. And then this was the next question, unless you have something else you want to add.
I don't. Let's move.
How can I work with providers who clearly, I love this, need help in this area to build a culture of compliance?
So I'm assuming the geographical area.
Yeah, we're going to go with that. Yeah, and it is. It's that's what they clearly say. In my company, we work with a lot of small, rural human service providers. There's just not a culture of compliance in general in the area of the world. In the area of the world. So I mean, but we know this.
I don't know that there is in any area of the world.
I know, really. There's not really, except maybe my house right now. And there's not a lot of resources for them to dedicate to developing it. It's not great, but we can't just abandon our responsibilities to our clients. Do you have any recommendations on how to work with the providers to build that culture?
Yes. Next question. First of all, whoever sent this in, I'm glad that you say that you don't want to abandon the responsibilities of your clients. Bravo.
Yes. Hear, hear.
Okay.
Just agreeing.
So the culture of compliance thing, I'm going to kind of disagree with one little part of this, which is the part about having a lot of resources to do this. I disagree that it takes a lot of resources to start doing this.
It just takes a desire.
Maybe time resources it takes a little bit of, but as far as financial resources, I'm going to say no. It takes very, very little monetary resources. And it's kind of like anything else. If you're going to build a culture of anything, then it's something it's just small, consistent things all the time. Not once a year annual training, not even quarterly training. It's all the time, consistent, small things over and over and over and over. That's how you're going to build that culture.
Yeah, it's security awareness, education. Education is the key. And, it's like, in a rural community, one of the things I've even, thought about doing is how could we help foster for our customers in these rural communities, and we do have them, to address what you're talking about there, is to just get everybody on board. And, we talked before about the HIM session we went to where the Mayo Clinic they go into the schools and teach not just the children, but the parents. Mm-hmm. And the controls that we want you to have at work are no different than what we would tell anybody else.
Yeah.
It's the same security. All we do at work is we worry about specific data elements. But as far as security awareness, it's the same.
Yeah. Your biggest challenge is going to almost always be the C-suite. The people that are calling you to come in and create that culture with their people, and then they go, but I'm excluded.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as soon as I give them that you're going to need to implement this policy. Well, can we do it for everybody but 3 people and there happen to be 3 owners? I'm like, no, just don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Don't do it at all, because if you're gonna leave one little piece out, that's your vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that, but the people below them look and say, well, if it's not going to apply to them, then it doesn't apply to me.
Yep. Yeah. Lead by example.
Exactly. So bravo for wanting to do something. Doggone, our podcast is absolutely free. And that is a way to build the culture of compliance, just by taking it and listening to it and then doing something with the content.
Yeah, doggone. You can.
Doggone it. And I tell you what,
Doggone
we're the
it.
only podcast out there that will give you double your money back if you don't like it.
And so many people are like, that's awesome. But you can do SANS, S-A-N-S, is an organization, and they do have a program called Securing the Human.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got some good stuff in it. I don't generally, it's mass-produced stuff. So, but it does have information trying to bring the point across. And it's all about what can you do to get them to understand that they need to pay attention, and then start educating just a little at a time. And the biggest problem in those small areas is, it won't happen to us.
Yeah.
It's that thing. There's the best way that you can get people to worry about disaster recovery is for the building next door to burn down. And that's absolutely the difference in everything else we see. And so until someone they know has had to deal with it, it won't be important.
Yeah. But I would also challenge you to consider approaching it the same way you would marketing. With marketing, they'll tell you that, okay, marketing is, unless somebody sees your ad, 7 or 9 times or whatever, that it's not going to convert to a prospect of a sale. So the key is doing it consistently, always marketing your product or service over and over and over again. I think building a culture of compliance is the same way. If you're doing something on security awareness, let's say you're doing password management training, don't say, well, we just did that last week or we just did that last month. That doesn't mean you have to wait another year before you go over password management again. Just do it consistently. Have it come up every single time it comes up. Have a discussion about it over and over and over and over again, and then it will sink in.
Yeah, there's an article that I just saw this morning. Someone sent us that millennials and how bad they are at passwords. So, yes. But you're right. It's not about saying, well, we talked about that, we're not going to talk about it again. It's, hey, have you thought about this? Have you made any changes? Why haven't you made changes? If you have made changes, what are they? Have that conversation. Don't train again. Make them participate, because the most important thing you can do is bring them in to participate. When people feel engaged in part of the process, then it matters. And also, don't call it culture of compliance. We're trying to get away from that, because that means I'm complying to what somebody's telling me to do.
Yeah, nobody wants to be compliant.
Call it culture of privacy and security. Call it culture of cybersecurity. Call it culture of I care. Just get away from calling it compliance, because that really gets this negative response. We don't want that.
Yeah, but the millennials do love the word culture.
They do.
They do. I've interviewed people and they're like, how's the culture around here? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's workaholic culture is what it is.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
But I mean, we're 146 episodes in. If we didn't talk about things more than once, we probably would have ended this a long time ago.
Really?
I mean, so you have to keep going with it. Nothing you teach anybody is going to be done with one application. It's a constant over and over and over again process. All right. So anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right. Number 5. What do we do to make sure that we are using secure fax capabilities with digital or online fax solutions? So the question was, faxes are a big issue, no matter if you are doing it old school with analog, what we like to call POTS, or with an internet fax server. The next step is to look at cloud fax solutions. What do you do to make sure that they are HIPAA compliant?
Or they are used in a HIPAA compliant manner.
Exactly. So first off, there are no products or services that are HIPAA compliant. HIPAA compliance is for a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's we have a lot of discussions about this, but particularly fax solutions. And, healthcare has lived and breathed with faxes forever. And health information exchanges, these HIEs are out there and they're growing, but there's these constant issues with interoperability. So faxing is going to be a thing for a very long time. But these analog connections, yes, the POTS lines, plain old telephone service.
Good job.
I know. I love that nerds can even take something like plain old telephone service and make it it's a POTS line. But we work with some groups and they still have some of those old lines sitting in their office, not by the fact that the technical people want them there, but by the fact that the powers that be want to have that level of control. Well, the problem is having control, if you're going to secure it, is one thing. But having control, if you don't care about security, is unacceptable in the world we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
And if we allow people this wide open, do whatever you want to do, send me stuff, and then I may or may not get it off that fax machine for another day or two, or it may or may not end up back with me. It could end up somewhere else. There's too much moving around. Information is our most valuable resource for a reason. There's too much of it to risk letting it go. So you do need to start finding a way to move away from those and have more controls in place, which is the internal fax servers and the online cloud solutions. And you have basically the same concerns. The telecommunication piece, so granted, you're going across a conduit in most cases, and often it's those POTS lines going into the digital stuff. But it is important that you do a risk analysis. You do a risk analysis and you evaluate how is it secured in transmission, how is it secured at rest, and how do we make sure it goes to the right places. So you got to worry about how they're received, stored, and delivered, because that is a huge problem, is delivery of faxes. Mm-hmm. And it's almost it's one of those things where you have to have a way of handling that. So you have to figure that out in your organization. And one of my big concerns is online fax services who will say, yeah, we're HIPAA compliant, but we will email it to you to an unsecured email account if you tell us to.
Mm-hmm. I had somebody send me one a few weeks ago.
I know. I'm like, what are you doing?
I know. I'm calling the client. I'm like, why are you faxing me? We don't even have a fax number. Went to my email. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? Why am I even in your fax machine?
Yeah. And the other thing is that many of these online services, they'll tell you they're not HIPAA compliant. But if you hand out that number to get PHI sent to it, then they email it and they're like, it's not on us. You let it come in here.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot you have to worry about and a lot that you have to define clearly how you're going to make sure those are secured. So it is its own policy and procedure by itself is handling faxing.
Yes. Go back to the Pony Express.
That's right. It is a fact-specific determination.
It is.
All right, we're down to our last one.
Yes, ma'am. Can I communicate with patients via unsecured email or text messages?
Maybe.
All right. That's our show for today, folks. Yeah, this one comes up a lot, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of, it's one of those things where even when you tell them you can, but you can't, or you can't, but you can, it's still complicated.
I know. I love asking a room full of healthcare folks, the ones that work in the offices. And I say, if your patient asks you to send their medical records via Gmail, can you do it? And used to, the whole room would say no. And I started educating away from that. And now half the room will say no, half the room will say yes. And there's going to be a smattering of people out there who go, what are you talking about?
You started to say the other half, didn't you?
Yeah, I know, really.
They have three halves.
I did the math. And I'm like, it's not a third, so we're going to go with a smattering. At any rate, the big issue here is, what are you sending and what does the patient know about the security of what you're doing? And there's a big thing that came up at HIMSS. your buddy Roger was speaking at HIMSS, and they asked him about the text messaging thing. And he said, as long as your patient understands it's not secured and they elect to do that, then you can do it, which is true. But then other people are like, but the CMS thing said, but I think there's a disconnect because I think the CMS discussion was about doctors talking to each other, not with the patients. And it's about that doctors talking to each other has to be secured because the patient doesn't get a chance to say, you don't have to secure my stuff.
Right.
So if you're talking within, the medical community, you still have to secure it. But if your patient elects for you to communicate with them unsecured, whether it be Gmail or text messaging or Hotmail or AOL mail, it doesn't really matter because they have given you informed consent. But if you're communicating with each other, no, you can't do that. And that's where it matters. And the other question that goes with that is, do I have to have it in writing? No, you don't have to have them sign anything in writing, but you do want to make sure that you get it confirmed and that you make a note about it, that you talked to them that day and put it in the record somewhere. Because if they ever come back and say, well, you never told me this wasn't secure, what do you think that OCR is going to ask you?
Where's your documentation?
Exactly. So the answer is maybe.
Yeah. It's one of those things I always tell clients is, stay away from it. It's too many ins and outs.
But if the patient specifically asks you to do it,
yeah,
and you have that documentation, you can't say no.
Right. Yeah, I'm referring to the other aspects of it where you're trying to do
to
things
each
internally.
other?
Yeah,
No.
Just don't do it internally.
Yeah, internally. And remember that whole I feel comfortable because I have encrypted email internally. Don't forget, if those email accounts are hacked, all that PHI is in there, and that's happening more than you think.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it. That's 6 questions, a few comments, a creepy laugh.
All kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a whole hodgepodge. So
There we go. Well, that's our show for today, folks. Remember to follow us on social media. Share us out to your favorite social media site. Rate us on the podcasting app. If you haven't tried it out, we have an awesome podcasting app. So go download that. Check it out. Make sure you keep spreading the word. We really appreciate it. And as always, send those questions and ideas in. We get more questions than we do ideas, but you can send those at contact@helpmewithhippa.com. And we might use your question on the show, just like we did these today. So thanks for listening, folks. And remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.